Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, your host, Toby Usnik. We are now in our 15th season, and I'm really happy today to have as our guest Paul Solman, who is an amazing journalist. Paul is a veteran journalist who's been covering economics and business and politics for over 5 decades. He's been the business and economics correspondent for PBS NewsHour since 1985. PBS NewsHour is my default television, along with NPR for radio, for those of you who don't already know that about me. And I just so respect the network and the people behind it, including Paul. He's received numerous awards for his work, including 8 Emmys and 5 Peabodys. He's also co-authored several books and taught in prestigious institutions like Harvard Business School and the Yale University. Today, we're going to explore not only Paul's career insights and views on the economy and philanthropy and so forth, but we're also going to talk about one of his co-founded organizations that I'm really excited about called the American Exchange Project. So with no further ado, Paul Solman, welcome to the Caring Economy.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here, Toby.
I'm always flattered when I have a journalist on because it's just a privilege because you do this all the time professionally and you get paid for it. So thank you for your time.
It's an amazing job.
Truly.
Whatever else you want to say, I consider myself so privileged to have gotten this job back in '85, and I've done everything on earth to hold on to it.
Good. Well, I can't wait to hear.
Because the privilege of, as you're kind of reflecting, the privilege of just talking to other people and being able to meet them wherever they are. And actually in this era with COVID now, be able to meet them in their homes, as for example, my office here. Really, it's the only word I can think of for
and to be able to go deep on thoughtful topics is really
that too. I mean, everything about the NewsHour gig is scary good. As my father once, in 1999, I wrote it down. I have it right up there. My father said to me, he said, "And what about your hours? You are absurdly fortunate."
You probably lose track of time, I'd imagine, many times. But as we always do, Paul, give us like a 3-4 minute digest of your life, where you grew up, how you found your way, maybe mentors, pivots, or whatever that got you where you got.
I went to Brandeis University, which is 7 minutes from where I live now. I was an art history major because my father's an artist. You can see some of his work. I think, I don't know what's up at the moment. Yeah, there's something it is. So I thought I knew Manet from Monet. I figured that was enough to go through an undergraduate career. At some point I realized, no, I'm not enough of a scholar to be an art historian, although I love art and go to museums all the time, even today. But I was recruited to write for the weekly Brandeis newspaper, The Justice. My freshman year, I was super flattered, although it was an extremely small school, and I don't think there was anybody else there who knew anything about art, or at least no other freshmen who knew as much as I did. And I began writing for it. I became the editor-in-chief or co-editor-in-chief of the paper my junior and first half of senior year, and I decided that journalism was it. What a great way to spend your life if you're a person who's driven by curiosity like I am, and novelty, and wanting things to change all the time. But that was 1966 that I graduated, Vietnam War, wanted to stay out, didn't want to emigrate to Canada. Those years, a journalism degree, only 1 year. So to stay out of the draft, I got a fellowship to spend 3 years in a graduate program where they paid me a modest amount, and that takes you till 1970. I fail my draft physical, or I'm deferred because I have asthma. And 1970, I begin in the alternative press in Boston. At that time, this is right in the middle of the 60s, right? 60s is 65 to 74, something like that. 1970, there are all these students around. There's all this anti-Vietnam War. There's the counterculture and so forth. And that could sustain 2, in fact, weekly newspapers here in the Boston area, which was a hotbed of all of what I just mentioned. I did that for a couple. I was a writer. I was the editor-in-chief of one of these papers. I was an investigative reporter. And in 1976, I started doing a story about Boston and Cambridge and how they raised money.
Sorry to remember, this was written journalism, right? Or
yes, written. This is still written journalism. I dabbled a little bit in TV on my vacation at the local PBS half-hour news show. And I'm writing about it, and I go, I don't know anything about this. This is how cities raise money. There'd already been the New York bond crisis of 1974, which no one will probably remember, but was a big deal at the time. I didn't know anything. And I went, I don't know anything about this, and nobody I know knows anything about this. And I'm a year and a half ahead of the baby boom, and nobody behind me knows. I'm going to see if I can't go to business school and learn enough to be able to be a business, I didn't even think economics reporter at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I got lucky. My career, to the extent that my career is successful in my life and my family life and so forth, luck is by far the dominant feature, even though I'm good at what I do. And as you can see, quite an energetic person for age 80.
I love it.
And that's also pure luck, right? I begin to do the story, and I apply for a fellowship. My family never had any money. Got lucky again and got into a program at Harvard and for journalism. Spent the year as a MBA student. I had a friend who was also in that so-called Neiman program, and he said he's from Israel and he was a TV guy. He said, with stories like this, I know how to make television. That's my career. Got out in 77, started with a local PBS station. By 1985, I went to the NewsHour. I'd done some documentaries. I ran a series with that same friend, half-hour documentaries on business called Enterprise. It was very successful back around 1980, 81. And that's it. I've taught, as you mentioned, a little bit on the side. That's how the American Exchange Project comes to be. That's it.
I spent 5 years at the New York Times Company as director of public relations. And my experience, and my whole career has been in corporate communication, sort of the other side of the phone or the desk,
yes,
the journalist. But it's been my observation, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree, but I think journalists are born. They can be refined, but it's a calling, I think, of some sort. I mean, there must have been.
It may well be. Look, as I was suggesting earlier, it fits my personality so well. Energetic, curious, and I want to be friends with everybody. That's why I wasn't good as the editor of the paper. I wanted to be friends with everybody, and really to be an editor or a boss, you've got to have a little more distance than that.
Or
work
on the
op-ed
side. Yeah, or take the op-ed side of it. But you know what? That's one of the reasons I do love NPR and PBS is I do believe truly objective journalism. And I wonder, how do you keep straight down the center? I mean,
I started in the left-wing alternative press. I was an advocacy journalist, certainly to begin with. I'm not so much a Brandeis, but certainly that was the calling, if you will, or that was the mandate, because that's what the appeal of our papers were in the early 70s. Alternative press. That was the alternative we were providing to the mainstream media. But going to PBS as early as I did, 1977, their mandate, our mandate, is not advocacy.
Right.
It's
absolutely.
just the opposite. And we've been mocked for that. And there was a terrific column in the Nation, I think, or a Village Voice somewhere in the early 80s, mocking the new PBS NewsHour. And it was about how Robin, at that time, it was the McNeil-Lehrer report, and it was Robin McNeil and Jim Lehrer, and how if they were interviewing Joseph Goebbels, they would give him equal time. And it was mocked. This was from an advocacy journalist, and what a parody of life that would be. Right. But that's what we've got. I mean, and that's what we're selling.
Yeah, and it really has worked, I think. I mean,
and you've got to have somebody doing that.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
truly. Through the years, you said McNeil there, and I think of like Gwen Ifill and Judy Peep. I mean, there's so many great journalists who've come through there. You've probably worked with all of them, I would imagine.
Oh, I know. Yes, of course, I know them.
Any fun reflections or moments that you might want to?
Well, so one thing I've noticed of Gwen, for example, was. This is true of Ray Suarez, true even of Jeff Bennett now, who in person are even more personable, sharp-witted, little ironic than they are on TV. So there is this tendency of people, even the very best of them, and all three of those were great. People were terrifically expressive and communicative and articulate on television, for God's sake. But television does tend to, tighten you up a little bit. I can't do live television to this day, as you can see. I'm such an excitable person that my heart's beating. Am I going to forget what I was going to say and so forth?
Speaking of education, I have to do a shout out. My niece Rachel went to Brandeis. We helped put her through school there, and while she wasn't on a newspaper, while she did her junior year in Denmark, she did have a blog, Danish and Famous, which was quite fun for a while.
Oh, fantastic.
You talked about your discovery process, but then you've stuck with it. You've done well with it. So is there a certain aspect of that type of journalism that really resonates with you for some reason?
Well, I mean, yes, I'm my nickname among my grandchildren, because of the first one, who's now 23, couldn't say grandpa, so she called me Mamp. And I am known among them for I would do tortures to them, so-called tortures,
Questions.
flingies, horse bites,
Oh,
skabooches, and then they'd have to say no skabooches, no flingies, no horse bites.
sweet.
Plays great until they're about 10 years old. It's a fab. So they came up with one, and that one was called Mamp splaining.
I like mansplaining.
because
That's
because
good.
I'm a stone, a congenital explainer. Okay, as recently as, I don't know, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago, I took my 23-year-old. She and I went to Amsterdam together, and her mother asked her how it was, and she said it was fantastic. Of course, there was a lot of mansplaining.
Mansplaining, yes.
Where else on TV am I going to be able to mansplain, right?
Yeah, but you have a gift at being able to distill and make digestible complex things like business and finance. So that is a gift.
I worked at it, I've kept at it for all these years. The more you work at it, the more you know, the more
Yeah.
you're able to really understand and then therefore simplify. And if you have a real drive to have people understand stuff or understand yourself, and you have a real drive to befriend everybody, and
Yeah.
you're real curious, what else is there?
We also share in common, you can agree or disagree, but I take an active interest in whomever I'm with. And so one of the
Yeah,
silver linings of COVID was that it allowed me time to launch this podcast. And I realized I don't have any regrets really, but if I were to start over it, I think I would want to be a television show host. I always loved from like Dinah Shore and what's his face, Oprah. Like I just
Jack Parr. How about Jack Parr?
all of it. And I love learning, right? So when I'm out with my husband and I talk to someone young or old, and Harlan will say, he thinks he's Barbara Walters. You don't have to answer all his questions. And when he says that to me, you know what I say to him? I say, you know what? I'm happy to answer any questions they want to ask of me. In the meanwhile, I'm not going to waste this time. I want to learn something. And
Yes, right.
you can't go wrong, particularly in New York, but I think anywhere. And that sort of will segue into your work with the nonprofit. You can't go wrong taking a deep, active interest in someone else. You'll learn something new. There will be an
Absolutely.
adventure in it, and it usually will be something that makes both parties better, I think. So why don't you tell us a little bit about American Exchange Project and how that came about?
Did a program at Yale for 10 years. In the last year, I befriended this guy who is the grandson of the historian David McCullough. So he's David McCullough III. We got friendly. He lives up in the Boston area. So we got together after that. That was 2016. He graduated in 17. He went and got a master's degree, came back in 18. And in the fall of 2018, Thanksgiving, he called me up and said, can we talk about what I'm going to do with my career? Now, he was a varsity baseball player at Yale. He's gifted in so many ways, and just totally charming guy. I'll give you one sense of him.
Yeah.
When I was at Yale, one of the things I did economics, and I did self-presentation or communication skills.
Uh-huh.
I would video students, and then I would critique with them. And I've done this. I did this at Harvard Business School back in the 80s. And so I've done it with hundreds of people. I don't remember, I can't swear this is true, but I don't remember anybody else to whom I said what I said to him after we videotaped him, which was, don't change a thing. Don't, seriously, I have absolutely nothing to say to you. That's what he's like.
Wow.
So he comes to me, and he's a guy who could have, because he was a varsity baseball player and all the rest of it, could have gone straight to Wall Street, straight to a consulting, the hotshot jobs that these guys and women get. But he wanted to do something meaningful with his life. He'd heard that I was trying to do some anti-polarization thing, but in fact, it was going nowhere. I was going to have institutional connections, Harvard, Yale, whatever. It was just going to exacerbate the problem. The hotshots come and tell the hoi polloi what to do,
Yeah.
and how to do it. So I was dormant. He comes in, he says, we're talking about that. He, when he was at Yale, had done a trip around the country like you did foreign exchange. He did it domestically and made friends in Texas and made friends in South Dakota and Cleveland. And he said, that's what I want to do with my life. So that's just 6 years ago, almost exactly. And we start trying to figure out what to do. He's teaching substitute teaching at his old high school up here, a public high school, Lincoln Sudbury. He's in class. Somebody said, Mr. McCullough, where'd you go to school? He says, Yale. They said, well, how could a guy who graduated Yale be a substitute teacher at his old high school? I mean, and he said, well, I'm trying to work on this project. And then everybody in the room was like, what do you mean? Well, I went to Texas and I roped a steer and I learned how to shoot a gun. Are you serious? We all live in a bubble here in Lincoln Sudbury. So he called me up that afternoon. That's probably like December or something, January. And he said, I got it. High school seniors, schools don't know what to do with them the second half of their senior year in particular. They, whether they're going to get a job, the military, go to college. They don't care about school. They're bad role models for everybody else. Let's get them ready to go to see a different part of the country the way I did and the way you want people to right after they graduate. Great. Originally it was going to be 2 weeks. That was going to be too expensive. We've whittled it down to 1 week. Then COVID hit. Then we were laid low. Then we did it online where we met people just random. Do you know somebody who knows somebody in wherever? I mean, I would have called you and said, God, Toby, you know somebody somewhere that, where there's a beloved teacher and the teacher will be interested. That's just what we did. So we started out in 2021 when it was finally safe enough. One girl wearing a mask, actually, because she hadn't been vaccinated. 4 communities: Kilgore, Texas; Lake Charles, Louisiana; Wellesley, Massachusetts up here; and Palo Alto, Stanford. Completely different kinds of communities, and sent the kids from one to the other. And it was amazing.
Wow.
Just amazing. I really, obviously, we started this, I was raising money to help so David could move out of his parents' house and have his own place. And then, of course, we had to actually send them, and that cost, $1,000, $2,000 a kid or something because of all the, the cost of the transportation. And they bonded so that they're still, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, a girl from Lake Charles was up here for a conference where we were having her interviewed about an anti-polarization conference at MIT. And that evening, the girl she stayed with comes to dinner and they're like crying. And the girl's from, Wellesley and she's from Lake Charles. And so these are enduring connections. And there's this tremendous yearning, as I imagine you would not be surprised to hear. There's a tremendous yearning, particularly among young people, but I think it's among everybody from what I've seen now over the years that we've been doing this, to connect.
I take it that you've scaled because it's been a hit. You're now in how many cities around the country?
We're in about 60, close to 60 communities. We're in 34 states. As I say, most of them red. Turns out that the teachers in places like Montana and Wyoming are even more desperate to get their kids out, whereas the Wellesley, they go to Aruba anyway, so they're cosmopolitan, which is, of course, completely wrong.
Correct.
But and it was 500 kids this summer, 471. So we've sent about 1,000 kids now over the 4 years. Next summer, I think we already have, 700 kids signed up or something like that. It's just, we're constrained only to the extent that we can raise enough money to be able to do it safely, because the program takes care of itself. The kids just meet. It doesn't even matter what they do. Up here, the first group, I said, where do they want to go? I said, Dunkin' Donuts. It doesn't, the museums, the lobster trawling, we do all of that. It's what people in the communities arrange for the kids to see their community and to embed in their community. But the magic is the connection. They're all scared when they first come. They don't know, oh my God, who am I? And we don't send them in groups. We send them as individuals. And so they're all scared. They all bond around their fear. They all then bond with their hosts, because you were obliged to be a host for a week and travel for a week. And we're constrained literally only by the resources we have to send kids.
Ladies and gentlemen, again today on The Caring Economy, we have as our guest Paul Solman. He's the business and economics correspondent at PBS for decades, and also co-founder of American Exchange Project, which we're talking about right now. Paul, just housekeeping, what's the best way for a teacher or student or parent to learn more about?
The website. The website has everything, including, signing up, donation, and all the press coverage we've been on. Good
And I
Morning
think I have
America.
that here. It's American. Let me see. You can
It's
tell.
If you just Google
American
American
Exchange
Exchange Project,
Project.org. Yeah.
project is the only tricky part because some people think program, but it's
American
American Exchange Project or AEP. The actual URL is one word, AmericanExchangeProject.org.
Org. Got it.
And
Okay.
go there, and then it's all everything's explained, and we'd love. I mean, it's an appeal I make all the time, but certainly make here, which is for those of you in some community who happen to be listening to this or watching it or hear about it, just go to the website and then see if you can build a constituency, a great teacher who we have an exchange manager in each place. If it gets to be enough kids, the exchange manager then has assistants helping her or him, and see if you can build a constituency to bring the American Exchange Project to your community. That's
Awesome.
where we're at.
Awesome. I also am thinking funding wise, you probably know these folks, but the two that come to mind for me from a foundation world is Dame Louise Richardson, who's running Carnegie Corporation right now.
Yes, and we are in close touch with her. Good. David is. Good. Had breakfast with her, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and is now meeting with her education person. So we're absolutely on that case. Yes.
And then Stephen Heinz at Rockefeller Brothers.
And he was one of our very first funders.
Good. So you got some good funders there, and that also suggests how quality of program you are. It's all about bridging leadership right now, right? We have a really a toxic, I think your term of phrase is toxic polarization. I agree with that. I think that we have more in common than not. I think we need to remind ourselves of the things that we share. You know, if you are a Yankees fan, you don't care if someone's black, gay, or whatever. You just want to make sure they're not a Mets fan, right? Or if you like dachshunds or pit bulls, you know,
right. But you can find. But the key to that is, and I've certainly thought plenty about this as a former Mets fan and somebody who's always hated the Yankees, that's the kind of us versus them that productively channels that aspect of tribalism which is born into us.
Yes.
When I go around the country, and I've gone in variety, not just for the American Exchange Project, but whatever, one of the ways I will introduce myself is to say, I like to apologize by starting by saying I'm a New England Patriots fan. In the days of Tom, now there's nothing to apologize for because we're so terrible that nobody even thinks about it. But in the days of Tom Brady,
yeah.
And that always got a laugh, and it was always a bonding.
Yeah.
Even though it was defining myself in opposition. I'm a New England Yankee, whatever.
Self-effacing.
So yes, it's more than that. It's non-toxic. It's actually bonding.
Yeah.
Because we both care about baseball or football or whatever. There's a hook for us to bond.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm trying to do it with my own family and this podcast and other ways. And I do think, again, we have more in common, and we can give examples. I never ask a question I don't have an answer for myself, right? So I do think things like music, if you're a concert goer, a sports fan,
yes,
person, you'll find your common ground, right? And interestingly enough, the villages in Florida, you hear throughout the past 10 years about how they're either conservative, MAGA Trumpers, or whatever. But I'm finding more and more there's a real diversity of people there from what I see in the news reports, gay, blue, red, what have you. And I think that that's a good sign. I think that we're getting back to a place where this country is more diverse than ever, like it or not. And you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go. But I like your program because it facilitates the opportunity for people to meet the other, right?
Yes, that's the whole point. Way. That's the entire purpose of the program is just that, just what you said. And you meet them on level ground.
Yeah.
We've got more in common because we're human beings and we're Americans.
And so you're talking about a 1 week exposure that can lead to more, but you don't need a passport. You don't need to speak a different language. So it's a safe way at a certain age to get a young person out and engaged. It's very exciting.
As the first step along the road to adulthood. Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time. A couple quick questions. One, do you have any because we're both so involved with the private sector and businesses, do you have any corporate partners or organizations we give shout out to?
It's a tightrope of sorts, or it's a perilous path. I don't know how you put it. Because of course we don't want to be we
beholden.
don't want to be pursuing anybody else's agenda. Of course, that's an issue with regard to funders as well. But our agenda is so clear that either you're with us or you're not. But
Yeah.
it's not like we're going to trim our sails to fund.
I don't know. I think like a telecommunications company, a Verizon or AT&T. I mean, because
We haven't gone that route. We don't maybe know how to. We now have a new head of development. We're certainly talking about that. We're trying to partner, at least in part, with United Airlines to get frequent flyer miles. That's an obvious first step. We certainly wouldn't be averse to
Now,
a corporation
yeah,
partnering with us as long and like I say, I mean, there's really almost no way I could think of that we would in any way be doing the bidding of anybody else because it's so clear what we're doing.
yeah,
But we haven't done that yet. If you have any ideas, please
yeah,
let me know.
absolutely.
I'll talk to anybody anytime.
I do. We'll talk more offline. I have some ideas around the private sector, and also, I'm reminded of Jonathan Haidt at NYU. You've probably seen some of his.
So no, we're in touch with Jonathan.
And
we're in his new book actually, and at the end of it,
I haven't read the new one, but I've seen him talking about it. I interviewed with him once, but his earlier book on coddling of the American mind, I suspect that your program also addresses this idea that young people are just delayed in their experimentation with everything from getting a driver's license to drinking to you name it, because they've been so coddled. So when you pledge them for at least a week from, say, Palo Alto go to Texas, you're giving them an opportunity to fledge and to take flight, right?
Absolutely. That's why.
Sidebar.
Yes. The premise of the program would be the same no matter what age we were looking at. The reason for doing it with kids this age is precisely that. It's the fledging moment.
Yep. Critical, particularly if the parents, for whatever reasons, haven't, or parent or guardian hasn't been able to. So I love it. I'm mindful of the time. Paul, we always ask our guests, the final question is about like pearls of wisdom in your career, your life. Are there sort of mantra-like things you find yourself saying to your
I have a bunch of them. In no particular order. There is no big time. Take the professor, not the course. Take no job for the prestige or the money is the main thing. A watched pot always boils if you're patient enough. There are no interruptions. That's the same idea. And I don't know. There's a host of others,
Awesome.
but those are the ones that and be nice to everybody. Oh, I know. My main one comes from French author, philosopher, and novelist Albert Camus, and he writes somewhere in a book called The Myth of Sisyphus. He writes, "You can be virtuous for the hell of it."
There you go. No regrets. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had Paul Solman with us today. He is the fantastic veteran correspondent from PBS NewsHour for decades, economics and business, and co-founder of the American Exchange Project. If you have a young one in your life, secondary school level, any background, anywhere in the U.S., and you want to give him, her, they a chance to grow and expand, check it out. It's AmericanExchangeProject.org, and tell them Paul sent you, and be in touch. Thank you so much, Paul.
I'll respond to anything.